Hello and welcome back to Parley. This one is sponsored by PistilWhip. Hope you'll enjoy listening. It's about lyrical evolution in Double Lariat. This is a song. You said somewhat more seriously this time. We're talking about lyrical evolution and analysis, if you've seen their previous Parley. The Vocaloid song Double Lariat by Agauniki P is a deceptively cute song and animation featuring the singer, Luca Megurin, spinning around with her arms outstretched. The title can thus be seen as reference to the wrestling move where a fighter wraps their arm around their opponent's upper chest and neck in an attempt to force them to the ground. Lariats are typically performed with a single arm, so Luca's two-armed spin can be likened to a double lariat. However, despite the lyrics and visuals, double lariat has as much to do with literal spinning as the Rolling Stones' Paint It Black has to do with literal paint. Instead, I posit that the spinning is actually a metaphor for a self-destructive pursuit of exceptionalism. Couple of quick notes before we begin. Yeah, these reviewing a piece of media parlay are fun, but I can't put the piece of media in the parlay. I've kind of pushed the envelope a little bit in the past and put a little bit in, but generally that results in the video getting flagged and usually monetized by the rights holder, which as a matter of policy isn't I really shouldn't just be doing it. So I've, of course, linked the song in the description, but I will have to go without any little example of it for this video, because I could find a way to, introduce a little bit of it, but that would take a lot of time. It would probably take longer than the entire parlay to find a good way to put an example in the video. I could just get some other Vocaloid stuff set up and play a little bit of it to make the point I'm about to make, but that would take longer than recording this entire parlay. So they'll be in the description. So if you do a parlay that is a media review, you should expect going forward that it will not be in the video. Maybe sometimes, but usually not. Yes, this is important because this is a Vocaloid song. If you're not familiar, this is basically I guess I'll describe it as being like a voice pack that is united under, one voice, I guess, that lets the voice kind of sing songs in a certain voice. It's that part's a little bit tricky. That means that this song has a particular sound to it that if you've heard Vocaloid songs before, you'll be familiar with. If you haven't, I would recommend listening to a little bit of it just so you sort of learn that, so you know that sound, because it is important for a couple of points we're going to talk about throughout the parlay. At least I think it is. It also just occurred to me while reading the beginning of this parlay this time that Luca Megurin, Meguru is to spin in Japanese, which, so she's holding her arms outstretched and spinning with doing double lariats, but spinning like a rotor blade. And her name is like to spin. Is that like what this Vocaloid singer's name is? And it happens to be that? I will also go on to say that I think the genesis of this song is probably, wouldn't it be fun to have the Vocaloid singer whose name contains to spin be spinning and calling that a double lariat, but then, there's some deeper meaning, basically. I think some people will balk at this, a beginning point I want to make before we get into PistilWhip's argument is that people have a tendency to say things like, oh no, it's just a meme. The song is called Double Lariat, it's just about her spinning. And in fact, in the comments of this video, I noticed a lot of people who said, I listened to this song and thought, oh, what a beautiful song that has some deeper meaning. And then I looked at the video and like, oh, it's just about spinning. No, like totally not. No. The original person who made the song maybe only meant it to be about spinning, but as we've talked about in many other parlay about interpreting media, that only minimally matters. Like what the original person like meant the song to mean, if anything distinct, doesn't really, that doesn't mean it like can't hold the meaning of this other thing. If many people interpret the song as meaning da 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 da, like it's really the same as if it did mean that. I would argue at that point, it's almost like the person who made the song subconsciously did mean that and maybe just didn't know if they were to claim that the song like isn't about that. You see what I mean? If that many humans pattern recognize that thing, it would be unusual if there wasn't some intent on the part of the creator. It doesn't really matter whether they would say it is or not. Anyway, so yeah, absolutely. I think the genesis of this song was probably a joke about that name, and then what meaning could that have? And I actually think there's some very clever ways in which that silly symbol has been made to have some further meaning. So meaning about what? PistilWhip says each successive chorus until the last one has the singer's reach, like the radius of the spinning, extending further and further from 85 centimeters all the way up to 6,300 kilometers. Sorry, I took off a zero there. 6,300 kilometers. More on that later, PistilWhip promises. For now, I would like to focus on the end of each of those choruses. Please stand back. The singer pushes herself to spin further and higher to the extent that she keeps other people away. So why is the singer going to such efforts? The first and second verse each provide two reasons. The singer thinks that spinning itself is fun, first verse, and that spinning long enough would eventually pay off, second verse. But the singer's voice is notably almost flat for these explanations. The singer then goes on to describe how other people spin better, first verse, and higher, second verse, than she does. Her voice is much more animated when she describes these parts of her situation. It can therefore be inferred that her primary motivation for spinning is her perceived inadequacy rather than her personal fulfillment. Ah, well, I didn't think that. When listening to this song myself, I would say it's that the spinning itself being fun and that spinning long enough will eventually pay off are just lower in pitch than when talking about people spinning better and higher. Now you might then say, well, all right, sure, but like same difference. The higher pitch parts of the song are the parts that are, being made to be more significant. There's kind of a breakdown where it's lower pitch singing, and then there's a high note that is meant to be the thing that's emphasized. And the first thing being like not the real reason, and then the second thing being the real reason is a very common, trope or way of storytelling or way we delude ourselves in general, sure. Yes, but I do think that Vocaloid voice packs make it a little bit difficult to discern meaning here. Higher notes just sound more distinct in these voice packs. They just sound more distinct. I think probably because they're a little distorted from the pitch being adjusted upward. I get why you would say it sounds more animated, but I really don't like it. Literally is just higher pitched. And I think the thing is that Vocaloid songs basically automatically sound like that if you use a higher pitch. So is it being used just for the musical value? Now, again, I don't necessarily think that that point is necessary for what you're saying to be a reasonable interpretation. So you say the first thing maybe isn't the real motivation, but then there's a change in pitch to the second thing, which is maybe the real reason. I don't think it has to be that one of them is more or less animated, which is good because according to me, we can't really know that with a Vocaloid voice pack. For that to be a logical interpretation, like I think that reading totally makes sense. I don't agree that it is, more flat here and more animated here. To me, it just sounds like a change in pitch that consequently, because of the format, sounds higher pitched. But you could say potato, potato, chicken and the egg and the chicken, mix your metaphors, and I still think it's a reasonable point. But I did think it was an interesting moment where it being a Vocaloid song altered my interpretation. I'll be honest with you, I don't like Vocaloid voice packs very much. I just don't think they sound good. But it's a matter of taste, and this is a lot more interesting than I thought. Like trying to interpret a song using that type of voice is, and this is almost always how it is, a lot more interesting than I at first thought, because I had been underselling it because I'm not particularly a fan. I actually liked this song, but but in general I'm not. And part of the reason is because I am interested in the kind of character of the physical instrument put on the spot rather than an electronic instrument. I don't think that it's bad for these things to exist. I am just saying it's like personally not my auditory taste, right? But I do think there's a lot of interesting things to draw from something being physical. You know, when someone plays a physical guitar, the way they take their hand off the strings or the pickup gets, released from its duties temporarily, you can kind of hear those things, almost like you can hear the feelings of the person who is playing it. You can play in a more languid way or in a more aggressive way. And of course, you can do that with electronic music. Ultimately, it's just, changing the attack, sustain, release, etc., and adding other sounds from doing various things with the instrument. But I would argue that the instrument of expressing yourself with a physical instrument, that is much more difficult to digitally program intentionally for a human. In other words, like you might very well do a few things in there that you don't entirely know are that thing. It's quite difficult to make something feel like a thing intentionally. Like, to put it a different way, if I give you a piece of mail I received, it'll look like mail. But for most people, if you had to make a piece of mail, make a graphic that looks like mail from scratch, that would be significantly more difficult for a lot of people. It's not impossible at all. That's why I use that example. That's what some of my branding is. Um, but it's more difficult. And so usually the result is that it isn't done. You don't get that character there. There's various advantages. Like, it's great that people who want to make music don't need to worry about getting a vocalist to do it. Like, I in my mind, that's the biggest positive of the Vocaloid thing. Again, this has nothing to do with my approval of the concept. It's merely my taste for the sound. But I do think part of the reason that I like not Vocaloid singing is because it has more character. I think it has more character. But keep in mind that all of this is the kind of stuff you would say if you didn't like the thing, right? People who don't like a thing generally dislike an inferior version of the thing. That's how that works, because it's hard to find the best version of a thing if you don't like it. So don't let me put anyone off or anything. Anyway, I think the read here, as that tangent ends, that this is about self-destructive pursuit of betterness, to the extent of keeping people away, is kind of the interesting turn. The meme of Luca Megarin, whose name is practically, spinning already, is spinning around with their arms outstretched like a propeller blade or a top. And the song is called Double Lariat, like, haha. But then the song is like, but doesn't that keep people at arm's length? Literally at arm's length. And arm's length increases throughout the duration of the song. Totally. Like that, a super clean read, in my opinion. Again, I feel like because I don't believe there is any like real reading of a piece. I'm a very death of the author type of interpreter. I think that what the person who made the piece says the meaning is doesn't, like, arguably doesn't even exist, and also doesn't like really matter at all. They may, I think in most cases, actually probably don't know the full extent of the thing that motivated them. And even if they do, it's not like them claiming the thing means a certain thing deletes the human experience of many other people interpreting it like that. It doesn't matter. You don't need people's approval to feel something. Um, and yeah, I think that, but this is like pretty intentional. The way to evaluate a reading would be, well, there's a lot of evidence in the text. And I do think that the change in pitch, even though I don't interpret it as a change in emotion or animation in the voice, I do think that is significant. Like that, it sticks out way more. That's the part of the song I'm remembering in my head because it was structured that way, I think. And people think that way, right? I would like to suggest for my own reading before we move on that it's not that the other reasons aren't there, maybe. Like, this is going to hit people differently personally based on how you've pursued your own personal projects. But I don't know, like speaking about my own YouTube and Twitch career, for example, entertaining you on the internet. Yeah, it itself is fun. I think it has really, but will in more ways eventually pay off. And it is also frustrating sometimes when I think other people spin better or higher. That would be better videos or more money or views, which are definitely different things, right? I don't really envy the more views, but I don't think there's a reason I need to not make more. Like, I don't need to be poor while improving myself. I'm a person who will never stop, even if like if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would just do this like okay, it would take like a week break to like live my life and lawyer up. But you know, I would still be doing this type of thing. I have to. Like, this is who I am. This is my personality. If I didn't, then it's not that I don't even exist anymore. It's so it's not like for some people the pressure of needing to improve is like why they try to make better things. That's not why I'm doing this. Like I would not stop, but wouldn't be able to stop wanting to improve the thing, even if I didn't have to. And in fact, a lot of the thing I do for a living, even though I don't yet make enough money at the time of this recording, is limiting how much I force myself to constantly improve something, because you just can't at a certain point. You have to balance actually making things. That is a tangent from this song. But anyway, I can relate to those points. I do think there are some people, not very many, that make more or less the same goal as my videos, if not the same topic, but they do a better job. Not much better. I'm catching up, I guess. But yeah, ultimately still better. And that discounts ways that you could purchase with money. For example, some of them have better graphics, but I don't hold myself accountable for that as much, because they have many more resources to make those things. Like if they have a team of animators, I'm not going to beat myself up for not having animated graphics in my videos, you know. But I do think there's people who are expressing their ideas better than me. But I don't necessarily think that the song doesn't work if those things are not more of the reason than the other things. It could just be that those things are the consequences. Those are the bad parts, right? Envying other people's thing, to a fault anyway, is not productive, like is bad. So I don't necessarily feel like the four reasons for going to such efforts are necessarily need to be like superior or inferior to each other for the song to work. But I would agree with you that it's significant how the ones that are about other people are framed differently from the ones that are about like her personally. That's definitely interesting, significant. Okay, a long tangent where I actually said most of my point, but that's important because we're now going to finish up the song. In the bridge, PistilWhip continues, before the third chorus, the singer does some introspection. What do you think? Would my former self like what I've become, despite my eyes spinning and my axis wobbling? This is simultaneously a recognition of how far the singer has come and what she's had to give up to do so, her own comfort and stability. Literal stability, like from spinning too fast, but also personal stability. You said there's a hint of regret here. I agree. I think the way this is framed, or like how it kind of begs the question, you know, what do you think? Would my former self like what I've become? That's that type of question where you don't really ask that if you yourself don't think, yeah, a little bit, for sure. The next section reinforces that the singer is experiencing a change in perspective, such that the world has taken on a new color. Hence, the singer's reach extends to its maximum of 6,300 kilometers, the approximate radius of the Earth, and she stops trying to push herself further. Instead of announcing the next step of her spin, she says, I think I can do it now. And yet her journey is not over. She still says, please stand back. It's only in the last chorus where she winds down to the reach of her own arms, 85 centimeters, and expresses her thoughts on what comes next. If I ever tire of spinning, please stand by my side. This is another acknowledgement of the singer's sacrifices, this time focusing on her distance from other people. I interpret this as, when I get over myself, I hope you will still be there for me. So yeah, this song presses a lot of buttons for me. Pistol Whip concludes lyrical evolution, a relatable narrative, a catchy tune, etc. I was interested in hearing what you thought. Yeah, even as a not a Vocaloid fan, I liked this song ultimately. It I never enjoyed the very beginning, but once I kind of calibrated my hearing to like it's this type of singing, I enjoyed it, and I think the way you presented the emotional move of the song is very pretty. Yeah, I agree. I think the beautiful thing is seeing the in the video, because there's a video, um, she spins above the earth, and sort of color, is breathed into the environment. Um, but there's a very emotional moment where she says, "Please stand back, like I'm going to do my thing again." But it's to get human connection, not to like spin even further. Uh, that was emotional. That struck a chord for me. That's beautiful. I think there's an interesting point in the fact that the world takes on color when the spinning reaches its climax. That's interesting. It could be just the song double dipping. My reading earlier was that it isn't that the envying other people's spinning reasons are more important than the personal fulfillment spinning reasons. That was my reading, a little bit different than yours, where you felt like the other reasons are more the focus. I would argue that this maybe supports that reading. The My reading here is that the song is just being forthright about the fact that if you attain a creative high, there is something beautiful at the end of that mountain. It just might not be that healthy to climb it. That I feel like seems like the point. Um, there is that negative, despite my eyes spinning and my axis wobbling. Axis wobbling is a somehow upsetting detail to me. I think that's cool. Um, and remember, it is translated, although who translated it, who like we have no way to know. But that could significantly affect the reading. This isn't like poetry where we need where we can scrutinize every word as having been engineered some meaning. There may not be, simply because it wasn't translated by the person who wrote it, or maybe it was. I don't know. Um, Anyway, the point is that there's a negative to the spinning, and the color being breathed into the environment. It could just be viewed as the positive part of that, achieving something great. It might feel good, but then you still don't feel great personally, because you sort of pushed yourself too hard for that thing. I can definitely relate. If you've done any large creative project, you can probably relate to that. It's hard to not push it and not bite off more than you can chew. It's hard to do a big project and not hurt yourself a little bit in some way, push yourself a little too much in some places. But it doesn't mean that I think all those things weren't worth it. Some of them weren't. Some of them I went too far. But a lot of the time, I think it would be disingenuous to act like there wasn't anything there, basically. Um, yeah, I don't know. Another reading I want to add, is when we get to the maximum radius. She says, "I think I can do it now." What does that mean? Do what? Um, have enough security to pursue true human connection? Is that what it is? Is that why? What has been gained such that such that she can do it now? Is it security, like personal validation, and then now she can connect to other people? Um, I don't know. I think that's tricky. I also want to talk a little bit about PistilWhip's reading of "If I ever tire of spinning, please stand by my side." You said, you paraphrased it as, "When I get over myself, I hope you will still be there for me." Yeah, um, I I guess so. But I can't help but feel like there is a little bit more of like we're winding down. I don't like the order bothers me a little bit. You know what I mean? I think I can do it now. If that is connect with other people, maybe that just doesn't make sense. But if that is connecting with other people, you'd think that comes before um saying when I get over myself, I hope you'll still be there for me. I feel like that should be they should be swapped. I don't know. Like the order of operations mentally is a little weird. But this is a song. Sometimes I feel like it's important to be careful of that. Like the form is a form that is known for detail, like little idiosyncratic details, known for things that don't necessarily need to be in the exact order. They're just kind of around the right part. Songwriting is a very interesting form of communicating meaning because it, in a lot of cases, communicates the meaning pretty on the surface. It will often say things fairly plainly because they're going to be heard in the middle of a song, and yet the aggregate, easy for me to say, the aggregate of all of those meanings is often a lot deeper. So I would say like on a taking the piece as a whole, there might be some like fairly significant depth, but a lot of the time the individual lines fairly plainly say what they mean, which has been true of this song, I think. Obviously, there are, I'm sure, songs that have labyrinthine poetry like meaning, sure. Um, but a lot of the things in this song quite directly say the things that we're interpreting them to say. If I ever tire of spinning, please stand by my side. You might not word it as when I get over myself. I hope you will still be there for me, but like that's pretty close. You know what I mean? Like that's not much of a reach. That's almost exactly what it says. So it just depends on what you interpret spinning to be. You see what I mean? It's quite plainly saying that meaning as long as you take the rest of the song in aggregate and have already interpreted spinning to mean something else. You see what I mean? Pretty direct, but it relies on the entire song's context to be direct. So it's not that it's shallow just because it's saying what it means plainly. It's getting its depth from the context rather than from that single line, I would argue. And I think that's common in music. Um, I don't really have much else to say about this specific song, but I did want to talk about lyrical evolution a little more because you've talked about it a lot and I haven't, and it's not because I'm not interested in it. So we'll talk about that a tiny bit more. You even gave a couple examples of other music that has lyrical evolution. One of which I wanted to highlight. There's a lot of them, so we're not going to have time to do them all. But I did want to talk about that a little bit. So lyrical evolution. This is the thing about the same thing being in a song, being said in a song, there being a chorus that repeats something, or a breakdown, or a bridge that says something. The same thing, or kind of the same thing every time, but its context changes, or it literally changes. So in this song, it's that she says, my reach has extended to da 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 da, and then please stand back. I'm gonna try to spin now. But the context of that changes a lot until I really do think very emotional final please stand back when the reach retracts, and it's about keeping yourself away from other people. Um, so this is a good example because it's nearly the same thing, not necessarily um, the lyrics literally changing. So, like in some songs, it becomes something like let me use one of these as an example. Sure, let's use the painted black one that you mentioned. So, that song starts. I see a red door and I want it painted black, but then it becomes I see my red door and I must have it painted black. Not a coincidence. You could see it, and I actually do in the context of that song, which I have very clearly in my head. I do think there's an element of just mixing it up for the sake of adding a little bit of texture to the music. But that one is so, again, kind of like my argument before. It's so easy to trigger that some kind of meaning from a human by wording it that way, doing that change in wording, that it no longer matters whether it was actually intended to mean something further. It just does now. It doesn't matter if the Rolling Stones like didn't think of that, and they almost certainly did. Um, I see a red door and I want it painted black is a distance from the subject. That I see my red door, I must have it painted black. It is just extremely obviously that's much closer. um, And the key here is that there were minimal changes made to what was being said. It's the context of the song. And remember, you've been listening to the song for like just longer, several minutes instead of 30 seconds, or what, I don't really remember when these happen in that song, when you hear those bits, right? And so uh, the idea of having this thing that repeats but evolves over time is really cool. Something I find monotonous in music is that music is kind of a cheap sell. It's kind of like movies, I guess. Movies have a really large breadth of quality and depth because they are good even if they're pretty bad. Well, I don't think so, but for a lot of people, the experience would be pretty good or would get the job done even if it isn't that good. I think this is different from video games, although it sometimes you could be forgiven for not thinking so, where the because there are so many moving parts, the game doesn't really, like, you could have a playable game, but the game won't really do what it's trying to do unless it is of a very significant quality. This isn't true for every motivation for playing video games, but let's talk about making builds for a second. Have you heard of our Lord and Savior Buildcraft? um, yeah, the if a game is gonna have build systems, they need to be pretty good, or it's almost worse than if they weren't there at all, in my opinion. I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Um, Whereas in a movie or when listening to a song, I mean, it could have nice rhythm. It could have like a singer with a nice voice. There could be a cool or pretty actor on the screen. You go out to see the movie or whatever. There's a lot of ways the thing can be only partially good or not even that good, and it still just kind of does the thing. It gets the job done. It fills a role. Video games are a role filling media, but I think that many of the ways they are trying to achieve fun are just significantly harder than some of the ways that movies and music can be fun. And importantly, very little movie and music media, it can't work that way, even if it's trying to be something better. You see what I mean? A song with deep meaning that has like pretty musical elements and such, like, will probably be enjoyable if you just listen to it, even if you don't interpret the meaning in it. A movie that is like has some deeper emotional meaning could still be enjoyable even if you don't get it, as long as there are many other elements that could be doing the thing. It would really only be if the thing fully committed to only having any meaning that it would be like unenjoyable unless they did a really good job. I guess is what I mean. Now, don't get me wrong, I really don't feel this way. That's why I don't really like movies and music. Because I am picky and demanding with my media, and that's not good in my opinion. It's good to have contrast and just enjoy the thing that's there, but I just won't hack it. A bad habit or high standards, you decide. I say both. It's a problem, but obviously it's good to have standards. But there's plenty of good things that I've turned my nose up at, especially when I was younger. That, like, why this thing is perfectly fine. Anyway, um, as they say, you need to drink the bad coffee. Uh, I don't want to, but it's usually free, so that's the best part. When you're on an airplane and there's a movie, Anyway, um, the point I'm trying to make is that most music is very repetitive. It doesn't do anything with the repetition and doesn't have a lot of variance. The verse and the choruses are basically identical. The verse isn't that much variance. The bridge barely exists, and then the song is over. And there's songs like that are good, fun, like fine, great songs. But they're boring to me because my pattern recognition has gotten out of control, and I can't stop noticing that they're the same or formulaic or whatever. So I really enjoy, God, that point took a long time, through composed music. through composed music being this idea that the music doesn't really repeat its structure or motifs directly. It generally transforms them over the course of the duration rather than having a mostly recurring structure. Now, obviously, this is a spectrum. An example of a song that I'm worried people won't like, but I'll give you an example, is Growing Old is Getting Old by Silver Sun Pickups. That's the first example that came to my mind. If I can find that, I'll link it in the description with the other thing. I'll just write Silver Sun and I'll remember what that means. And I like these because they, over the course of their 3 or 4 or 5 minute duration, and they tend to be a little longer, they build to something. I just feel like they're kind of doing something, or you go on a little journey. I don't know. I'm really interested in the lyrical evolution thing because it is an example of another way you can do this that really worked for me without abandoning the song structure thing. For some people, the through composed music might feel too involved or distracting while you're doing something else. I may have felt that in the past, but I'm interested in how uh, that could change in those songs too. Some of those songs have that, and I wasn't focused on it because I was overly focused on the novelty of, oh, it doesn't have that strict structure, which is cool. I just thought that was neat. Um, I think combining the two would likely produce the songs I'd like the most. I just think it does something with the form. It's just more interesting to me. But I'm being a snob because let's be honest, it would be a lot less interesting if I didn't have this opinion, and I do, so I might as well tell you. I want to read one quick example that you wrote before I go. You said, special mention to a fake psychotropic, another Vocaloid song, for having lyrical evolution with a phrase that doesn't change. In the first chorus, God, I'm sorry for cheating, is a cheeky, fastidious apology. In all subsequent choruses, it's earnest and a little desperate. Interesting, yeah, the idea of changing the context of the thing that's being said uh, throughout the composition. This is a way of doing it I really like. And personally, I think it's also not as hard as it sounds to change the context of the thing that's being said. I don't know. I feel like that's something humans are good at. So if you are going to write some music, consider through composing and lyrically evolving the text, and note that you may be able to do those things. It might be easier than you think. You know, the through composition thing, it doesn't, you don't have to never repeat motifs in the music, right? That's, don't do that. I don't do that. It just means that you're not putting it in a strict structure. Just make things change over time. Go on a journey. It can be delightful to think about making music that way too. If you're just thumbing around on, oh, a kalimba, who knows? No instrument in particular, thumbing around on your kalimba, you may very well find that you are thinking in terms of like what needs to be the chorus of this little thing I'm playing. Just go with it. I almost feel like it comes out more naturally if you try to sort of through compose a thing when you're playing by yourself. Anyway, yeah, I thought this was fun. I took it in a lot of heavy tangential directions, but as I always say when I do these, a little self-consciously because I think it's important not to do it too much. If you didn't like that, I guess we wouldn't be here. So thanks for listening. If you want to get your own parlay like this one, you can see how to do that using the stuff in the description. And yeah, again, I've included a few songs in there too. Thanks very much.